It didn't begin with a war. It didn't begin with a sacrifice. It began with blood, brothers' blood, spilled not on the battlefield, but in a field of silence. Cain, the firstborn of humanity, in a storm of envy, struck down Abel. And in that moment, as the earth drank from Abel's lifeless body, the story of mankind took its darkest turn. Yet buried beneath the raw tragedy of the first murder lies something far more unsettling, an ancient puzzle that continues to baffle scholars, believers, and seekers of truth to this day. After killing Abel, Cain is confronted by God, not just punished, but cursed to wander the earth as a fugitive. And it's here, in the midst of divine wrath, that Cain says something that cracks the narrative open. "Whoever finds me will kill me." Wait, who? According to the biblical account, only Adam, Eve, Cain, and now the dead Abel existed at this point. So who were these others Cain feared? Who else was roaming this supposedly empty world? Then comes the twist that no one sees coming. Cain leaves the presence of the Lord and settles in a strange, whispering land, Nod, east of Eden. And then the text drops a bombshell with casual ease. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. As if it were normal, as if it made sense. But it doesn't. Not at first glance. Who was this woman? Where did she come from? Was she his sister, born to Adam and Eve, yet unmentioned? Or was she someone else? Someone who doesn't belong in the tidy genealogy of Eden? The Bible falls silent on her origins. No name, no lineage, no explanation, just a quiet insertion into the story, as if her presence was expected. But it's not by readers who've been told only one family populated the earth. This silence may not be an oversight, it may be intentional, a shadow deliberately cast over a part of history that was never meant to be fully seen. Because Cain didn't just have a child, he built a city, and a city means people. It means structure, labor, innovation. It means culture. How did the son of the first humans, in a world supposedly barren, raise a civilization? Who helped him? Who lived there? Who were the forgotten ones in the background of Genesis? And that brings us to Nod, the land of exile. The name appears just once, almost like a murmur in scripture, but its weight is immense. Nod in Hebrew means wandering or fugitive. Was it a real place? Or was it a spiritual condition, a realm of separation where the cursed walk unseen by the eyes of heaven? If it was real, how could a land already exist outside Eden? How could it be populated? Were there others never mentioned, inhabiting the fringes of sacred history? Some scholars dare to suggest a radical idea. What if Cain's wife wasn't descended from Adam and Eve at all? What if she came from an older world, a forgotten race? This theory, whispered through forbidden texts and ancient traditions, speaks of pre-Adamic peoples, civilizations that thrived before Eden's dust was even stirred to form a man. A parallel humanity, erased from canon, but echoing in ruins, myths, and mysteries. Others argue that Nod wasn't a place on any map. It was the space between God and man, a spiritual exile, not geographic. Cain, stripped of divine presence, wandered in a wilderness of the soul. And yet, he builds, he procreates, he settles. Which raises the haunting question, how does a man cursed with eternal wandering build a city? We must return to the one detail most try to ignore: Cain's wife. If she wasn't a sibling born to Adam and Eve, then who was she? Genesis 5:4 hints at other children, sons and daughters born across Adam's 800 post-Seth years. That's 8 centuries of fertility, hundreds, maybe thousands of offspring, never named, never counted. Why? Were they unimportant or were they hidden? Some traditions suggest Cain married a sister, one of Adam's unnamed daughters. This view holds that early humanity required such unions to multiply. But even this explanation doesn't add up. If Cain fled to Nod, was she there waiting? Did she follow him? Was she born before or after the murder? The math and the logic start to unravel, which is why other voices outside the mainstream propose something far more daring. That Cain's wife was not of Adam's line, that she came from a different stream of humanity, one deliberately omitted from the sacred story, one erased to protect a deeper mystery. Because what if Cain's wife wasn't just another woman? What if she was the key to an entire world lost in the shadows, a world populated not by the children of Eden, but by the children of something else? If true, this would explain the sudden appearance of cities, of crafts, of music, of metallurgy, of civilization. It would mean Cain's descendants inherited not only his blood, but knowledge from a forgotten age. And here's where the mystery deepens. If Genesis omits these children, daughters, and other families of Adam, what else does it leave out? Why is there a curtain drawn over the true scale of humanity's beginning? Ancient Jewish tradition often constructed genealogies for a purpose. Not to list everyone, but to protect specific lines, messianic lines, prophetic lines. To tell a spiritual story, not a census. Those left out weren't irrelevant, they were excluded on purpose. And so we ask, who were these hidden ones? And why were they silenced? Because maybe, just maybe, the children of Adam scattered. Some followed the divine path, others strayed. Some were pure, others were corrupted. And the ones who strayed, those nameless sons and daughters, may have become something else entirely. They may have mingled with others, with ancient peoples, with legends, with things not meant to be remembered. What if Cain didn't just start a city? What if he became a bridge between two worlds? A man born of Eden, married into something alien. A hybrid line, carrying both the mark of God and the blood of forgotten races. And what if his wife carried secrets not of Eden, but of lands older than the garden? Comment what city you're watching from. You're going to want to stay with us for what comes next. But what if the silence in Genesis isn't a gap? What if it's a veil, a thin, intentional curtain between what was written and what was never meant to be said aloud? Because Cain's story doesn't stop with a wife and a city. It spirals, it deepens, and somewhere beneath it all, hidden in the creases of the oldest scriptures and the whispers of forbidden books, lies a truth more ancient than Eden. Some traditions speak of hundreds of children born to Adam and Eve, an invisible generation, scattered across the early world. But other voices go even further. They speak of people who walked the earth before Adam ever took his first breath. Pre-Adamic beings, not metaphor, not myth, people or nearly people. Civilizations erased by time or theology. If Cain found his wife among them, everything changes. The theory is as old as it is controversial. The Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2 describe not the same creation, but two separate acts. In Genesis 1, God creates mankind, male and female, and tells them to fill the earth. But in Genesis 2, the story slows. The tone shifts. Suddenly we're in a garden, with one man alone, molded from dust, given divine breath. This isn't repetition, it's refinement. Two creations, one universal, one sacred. If so, Adam wasn't the first man. He was the first chosen, the first bearer of a spiritual lineage. And Cain, the first to walk away from it. Exiled from the divine, welcomed by the forgotten. If his wife was a daughter of that earlier humanity, their union wasn't just a marriage, it was a fusion, a bridge between two lines, one divine, one human, one remembered, one erased. And if that sounds like speculation, look closer. The ancient world is filled with stories of people who lived before history, before time. The Sumerians spoke of kings who ruled before the flood. The Egyptians of a golden age ruled by gods. The Hindus of previous yugas, vast cycles of forgotten civilization. These aren't just myths, they're echoes. Even within Christian thought, some dared to question the beginning. The 19th century theologian William Dwight Whitney proposed that Adam might not have been the first biological human, but the first spiritually awakened one, that others walked the earth but lacked the divine breath. If Cain married into that forgotten line, it would explain everything: the city, the fear, the culture, the technology, civilization itself. And then there's the name no one forgets: Lilith. Not in the Bible, but never truly absent. She lingers in the shadows of Jewish folklore, the first woman, not made from Adam's rib, but from the same earth, equal, unyielding, and when she refused to submit, she left Eden, or was cast out. The texts differ, but the exile is the same. She disappears, but not entirely. The alphabet of Ben Sira, a medieval text echoing ancient beliefs, says Lilith fled to the wilderness, to the forgotten places, and there she birthed a race, not of sin, but of wildness, of independence, of defiance. Some stories say she birthed 100 children a day, others that she consorted with fallen angels. Whatever the truth, her descendants were not of Eden. They were something else. Could Cain, wandering in exile, have found them? Could his wife have been one of them, a daughter of Lilith? That would explain her sudden appearance, her otherness, the fear Cain had of being slain because he was not alone. The world wasn't empty. It was already full, populated by beings outside the line of Eden. And if that's true, then Nod wasn't just a land, it was a borderland, between the divine and the forgotten, a place where exiles go, where rules are different, where civilization begins, not in innocence, but in rebellion. Think about it. The line of Cain is credited with the birth of art, metallurgy, music, and urban life. Jubal, the father of all who play the harp. Tubal-Cain, a master of bronze and iron. These aren't primitive skills. They're advanced. They hint at memory, inheritance, secrets passed down from something older, something fallen. Some say these gifts came from angels, from the sons of God mentioned in Genesis 6, celestial beings who descended and mingled with humans. But what if the line of Cain was already touched by that otherness? What if his children weren't just inventors, but hybrids, carriers of knowledge not meant for the garden? Cain wasn't just cursed, he was marked, a sign placed on him so no one would kill him. Why? Who would dare? Who would know what that mark meant? Unless the world already had laws, cultures, people. Perhaps the mark was not just a warning, perhaps it was recognition that this man came from Eden, that he was different, feared, sacred, or dangerous. And maybe that's why his descendants were both brilliant and broken. Maybe that's why his line builds cities and then vanishes, because they were always standing on the edge of two worlds, not divine, not fallen, just outside, forgotten by Scripture, but not by the stones, not by the myths. There's a reason Genesis is so selective. It isn't a history of the earth, it's the story of a promise, a spiritual lineage. Everything else cast into shadow. But the shadow speaks. Through the silence, through the gaps, through the woman with no name, through a city built by the cursed, through the music of a forgotten people. They say truth hides in the details, but sometimes it hides in what isn't said at all. The wife of Cain may be the single most important unspoken character in the early Bible, not because of who she was, but because of what she represents. A whole world veiled in mystery, a bloodline that shaped the world before the world had a name. Some say history begins with memory, but the oldest stories, the ones that truly matter, begin in silence. And as we near the end of Cain's story, we find that silence wasn't empty. It was deliberate. A shadow draped over truths too dangerous, too wild, too uncontainable to write in stone. Because Cain's legacy didn't end with exile or even with a city, it carried on in bloodlines, in builders, in giants. There's a passage in Genesis that shifts everything, chapter 6, a moment so brief, so charged, that it feels like a rupture in the fabric of the narrative. When men began to multiply on the face of the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took them as wives, any they chose. Who were these sons of God? And why did their union with human women birth giants, Nephilim, mighty men of old, men of renown? Theories divide. Some say they were the descendants of Seth, the righteous line, falling into sin by mingling with Cain's corrupted offspring. But others, more ancient, more daring, claim they were angels, watchers, celestial beings who crossed the divide between heaven and earth, who saw the beauty of mortal women and chose desire over duty, who descended and never returned. The Book of Enoch, buried for centuries and banned from canon, expands on this rebellion. It speaks of 200 watchers descending on Mount Hermon, swearing an oath to defy heaven. They took wives, fathered hybrids, beings of immense power, and taught humanity forbidden knowledge, magic, war, weapons, cosmetics, secrets of heaven, ripped from divine hands and given to mortals. This, Enoch says, was why the flood came, not just because of sin, but because something unnatural had taken root on earth. A corruption not of spirit, but of blood, a hybrid race, too powerful, too wild, too broken. And Cain's line? It's already different, already cursed, already building, already inventing. Could it be that Cain's descendants were the first to receive these teachings, that the line of exile was the first to make contact with the fallen? The timing fits, the clues align. Jubal, the father of music, Tubal-Cain, the master of metals. These aren't accidental mentions, they are fingerprints, because when the sons of God came down, they didn't approach Eden. They approached the cities, the outcasts, the ones who were already outside divine protection. And Cain's city, Enoch, may have been the first open door. Imagine it. A cursed man wandering east of Eden, a woman from a forgotten line, a city rising from the dust, and above them, watching, angels no longer loyal, whispering knowledge, offering gifts, seeding something else. If that's true, then Cain's mark wasn't just a punishment, it was a signal. He was the first to be cast out, but not alone for long. The watchers would come, the unions would begin, and Cain's line would be the first to cross a line that heaven would not ignore. And what of the Nephilim, those giants of old? They weren't just big, they were legends, kings, builders, tyrants. Stories of them echo across cultures. The Anakim of Canaan, the Titans of Greece, the Rakshasas of India. Everywhere, stories of beings too large, too wise, too terrible to be fully human. Are they myth or are they memory? Because all of this, all of it, points to a different beginning. One hidden behind the curtain of canon, one whispered by apocryphal texts and shattered monuments. Cain was not a solitary exile, he was the collision point between worlds. His wife, not just a mystery, but a message that others existed, that humanity wasn't born from one couple in a garden, but from many scattered across a wilder world, that Eden was not the start, but the center of a story much older than we've been told. And then there's the final question, the cities. How did the first cities rise? Not huts, not camps, cities with walls, music, metal and names. Jericho, Eridu, Çatalhöyük, long before Abraham, before Moses, before history had pages. Archaeology finds them, we date them, but the narrative remains silent. The Bible doesn't try to explain them because it's not trying to. The purpose of Genesis isn't to recount every people. It's to chart one line, one promise. The rest, shadows, cast aside. But those shadows speak. They speak of builders with knowledge too advanced for their time, of towers reaching the sky, of gods walking with men, of a world that ended once by flood and had to start again. Cain's line vanishes before the flood, but its legacy lingers in stories, in ruins, in blood. And maybe that's the greatest secret of all, that before Noah, before Babel, before Sinai, there was another world, one we've forgotten, one we weren't meant to remember, but the cracks are showing. In scripture, in science, in myth. And through those cracks the truth begins to seep. Cain married a woman. We were never told her name, but maybe we were never meant to know it, because to know her name would be to know the rest, and the rest changes everything. If this mystery shook your view of the beginning, you haven't seen anything yet. Hit subscribe and step with us into the next forgotten page of the ancient world.